I've worn the same T-shirt as well, so you can just chop it all into one.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Breaking Point Podcast UK. Today we're here with Jack Stead, who is he's trying to wave, I think, but it's very jumpy. So fingers crossed it doesn't look so jumpy in the video, because then we'll have no problems. Because who cares what me and you see? It's about what everyone else sees. So
I'm in Thailand,
and Jack
so
is yes, Jack's in Thailand. I didn't mention, so we're all a bit jealous of him, as you can see by his background. So, Jack, how are you doing today? Yeah. How's it going in
I'm doing
overcast Thailand?
Absolutely brilliant. So currently I'm in the north of Thailand in a little village called Pai. It's one of the places I really wanted to visit in Thailand. It's very well known for its holistic approach. So it's got stuff like breath work. There's lots of meditation classes here. There's lots of really good stuff to get stuck into. And I'm actually currently volunteering at a hostel in Pai. And what they do here is, again, very holistic approach. So there's lots of free movement. There's lots of different ceremonies. There's stuff like meditation, ice baths. So all of the stuff that I love to do and all the stuff that I push my clients to do as well. So it's a great space to be able to actually base here for a couple of weeks and to get to know people, get to know people's stories, and obviously get involved in all of the activities and programs they have here, which is really, really good for me. And it's just I've stumbled upon it. I didn't plan it. It just came up. I came to this hostel and felt so at home and comfortable, and I love the vibe they have here. And then the opportunity to become a volunteer became a thing. So I took it with both hands, and I've absolutely loved it. I've done my first week, and it's incredible. Yeah.
Are there a lot of Brits out there?
Do you know what? There isn't actually that many. There's a lot of German people. There's many nationalities here. There's German. American. There's Israeli. Yeah. There's French, Dutch. There's loads of people here. But yeah, in terms of English, I think there's one other English guy here, and it turns out actually he lives 5 minutes away from where I do in the UK, which is just mind blowing. The fact we're in the same place at the same time, and we live literally. I could drive to his house in probably 10 minutes from where I live back home. So it's crazy how you travel to the other side of the world and you have connections to your home life and connections to people for where you're from. I just find that, mind blowing. One of the main things I love about traveling is that you get to meet so many interesting people that I've never probably met in my life before. People that come from all different backgrounds, all different cultures, and it's a really good experience to be able to understand and see life from a different point of view, from different cultures and different backgrounds, and everyone has their own story. So I've really got stuck into talking to people on a much deeper level than I normally would, and getting to know them, getting to know their background, their history, their story, and it's given me a chance to open up about my own story, which is, giving some people some advice and some people on the same sort of journey from where I was a few years ago. So having these conversations is not only good for myself, but it's good for other people as well. And I'd advise anyone that wants to go traveling to definitely go do it.
Absolutely, yeah. And the great thing about being where you are is, given the things that you just listed off that are available there, it's going to attract a lot of people with similar interests that you have.
Yeah.
And that is obviously going to be beneficial in terms of communication and telling your story, etc. So that's brilliant.
Yeah. No, exactly. And I mean, the things that they do here, so like the ice baths, the ecstatic dance, the meditation classes, these are all things that maybe 5 years ago I would have completely turned my nose up at and been like, what's that? But it's now part of my daily practice and something that I practice every single day, and has helped me drastically go from the point where I was 5 years ago to now. So, everyone that's here is in the same mindset. Everyone's open to the idea that there is this much more holistic approach to dealing with mental health and dealing with the way we feel and the way our body feels. So it's nice to be surrounded with like-minded people that think the same and are into the same sorts of things. But yeah, I absolutely love it here.
Good. No, it looks great. I really want to go out to Thailand, and I will do at some point. So going back to, you've mentioned it already, but start off the podcast with your sort of origin backstory. Where were you 5 years ago, and how did you end up to where you are now? in pie?
Okay, so for me, my journey with feeling um, very low, very depressed, started at quite a young age. So it started around 7 or 8 years old for me. It wasn't at the time
Wow.
something that I understood. It wasn't a feeling that I was, I'd been explained or told that I was feeling this way. But it all came from a loss of a grandparent. So my nan died when I was 7. We were very, very close, and that had a knock-on effect from the age of around 7 through school. I was actually probably going through a grieving process, which I never understood. I didn't understand
Yes.
why I didn't want to, be part of groups. I didn't understand why I wasn't happy being at school, why I didn't get on at school, and why I was feeling that way. And from there, really, through my teenage years, very similar. I had this feeling of lowness. I never really had much excitement. I wasn't really very happy. And then carrying that into my teenage years, obviously I got to the point where I was able to go out and socialise, go out and party. Obviously was introduced to drugs and drink and drugs, and from there, obviously, the feelings of that low depressive mood obviously carried on with me through my early adolescent years. And obviously, when you mix that feeling of low and depression with drink and drugs, you often don't get a very good cocktail. And that led me
Yeah.
down a bit of a dark path for maybe 3 or 4 years. Um, I wouldn't say nothing has in my past has been very traumatic. I mean, in terms of certain people go through very traumatic experiences, which can obviously trigger some mental health issues, mental health problems. For me, it was just an ongoing process of something that I never understood until maybe 2 or 3 years ago when I started to open up my mind to the fact that there may be things I can do myself that would make me get further along the line, that would help me improve my mood, help me improve the way I felt about myself. Um, I went through the counselling process back in the UK. I went through, I tried antidepressants. Wasn't something that I got on with, wasn't something that was for me. And that's again what led me to the point of how can I do something for myself that is going to potentially make myself feel better. And that is when I turned to the holistic approach, obviously, of doing stuff like ice baths, meditations, journaling, all these sorts of things. But if I look back through the last 5 years, the growth for me has been exponential, and it's something I'm very proud of, because I've come from a place of not wanting to get out of bed in the morning because I was so crippled with anxiety and depression. Feelings of not wanting to be here anymore. What's the point of my life? Is anyone going to miss me if I wasn't around? All these sorts of feelings that I had, to the point of now where I'm able to solo travel halfway around the world, is something I never dreamed would be possible for me 5 years ago. So that's sort of like the journey as such. And obviously, as you can imagine, there's many twists and turns in there to do with relationships, to do with breakdowns of family relationships. There's been all sorts, and that's just normal life, I think. But for someone that struggles with them low moods, those sort of like events as such during life can actually sometimes cause you to plummet.
They exaggerate.
And that's something that I've found, is that certain things in my life have happened which you would call pretty standard things, but it's affected me in a way that maybe not affected someone else in that way.
Yeah, I get you. Would you say that you were quite a sensitive child growing up?
Yeah.
Were you very
Yeah, I
observant?
would.
And
I would.
say that you'd.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
exactly. And do you know what? My childhood was brilliant. My upbringing was fantastic. I had a great relationship with my parents, with my family. I can't ever fault that area of my life at all. But yeah, I definitely had a good upbringing. See, there's nothing really to sort of to put it on that. But being a child, I was very sensitive. I'd always felt quite in touch with my emotions and quite in touch with the feelings of others, the feelings of how I was feeling, which I know being a small child can sometimes be a lot to process. To actually understand all them feelings, as we grow older, we get a feel for our emotions and how we feel. But obviously, as a child, that can be very, very difficult.
Definitely, especially when nowadays, or not nowadays, I suppose, but a lot of kids are very can be very boisterous, and when you're young and you're a sensitive child, you can't process that as well as an adult can, and that could probably become quite intimidating and maybe even upsetting at beyond a certain level. So I can imagine that was pretty difficult, to be fair.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, growing up as a child, I had, I could say my confidence was I had very low confidence growing up as a child, and I took that again into my adolescent years of being very self-conscious, being very, aware of how others perceive me and worrying about how others perceive me. And that was something as I grew older through obviously my adult life, I carried with me until only a few years ago where I started to work on it. But that's something, that can have a real impact on especially children, is how they feel about themselves, the level of confidence they've got, in themselves. And I think in today's society, there's a lot of the way children grow up now. When we grew up, I think, I don't know how old you are, but when we grew up, we didn't have
24.
The latest PlayStation, or social media or anything like that. We used to go outside and play football and that sort of thing. Yeah, you had the odd, I was bullied in school. I had some troubles in school, which I think stems back where my confidence issue comes from. But I believe, hopefully the school system is a lot better than it was 10, 15 years ago. But for sure, okay, right, there we go. But society, in today's world,
I don't know.
is
It
all about
depends what you
social
mean, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. I had someone on the podcast a couple of weeks ago who was bullied very badly at school, and she was saying how, because she had very low confidence, we were discussing how, because she had very low confidence as a result of her home life, she would then take that with her to school, and then the bullies would pick up on that. And we were discussing how the sort of innate ability for even people that are as young as childhood can detect vulnerability, and then or maybe it's not that they detect it, maybe they just throw it out at everyone, and then the ones that they get feedback from they double down on, and then it builds like this vicious circle. So it is quite phenomenal actually how kids can do that.
For sure. For me, mine was the reason I was bullied because my ears actually, which I now love about myself. But at the time, obviously, that was what I was picked on for, and it led me to have correctional surgery. So at about, I think, 10 years old, I had correctional surgery to adapt obviously the shape of my ears, because obviously I was being bullied quite heavily in school for that. And I think, like I said, that is where the the confidence issue comes from. But yeah, for sure. I mean, it's crazy how kids can pick up on that, vulnerability, and target it at such a young age. But it also shows, like, I also think to myself, well, what are the characteristics of that child, and what have they been through to actually to do that? Like to see that as fun, or do they understand that what they're doing is actually bad and detrimental to that person's life, or are they just, is it a way of them having fun? Like, do they fully understand the consequences of what they're actually doing? I don't think so, personally.
That is a good conversation, and it's an incredibly difficult conversation, is how much moral sort of autonomy do children have? At what point do they become fully morally aware? And I think, there's the old sort of adage of, I don't know, maybe adage isn't the wrong word, but people that are bullies are being bullied themselves. And I think that, I'm sure there is a lot of truth in that. Like, if I suppose maybe it goes one of two ways. If you feel as if you're being bullied, either I don't want to say if you're a strong character, but if you're maybe slightly more disagreeable and coarse, maybe your reaction to being bullied is to start bullying someone else. And then if you're more quiet and sensitive, your reaction is to go in on yourself, and then unfortunately you'll leave yourself more vulnerable to being bullied yourself. So it's a tricky one, but yes, that is a good point.
That's something I definitely went through. Them feelings, just as a child, not understanding, well, why does no one like me? Why do people pick on me? What's wrong with me? All these sorts of emotions as a child. You can, if you don't, and it becomes part of our belief system. It becomes part of our, subconsciously wired
It does, yeah.
beliefs about ourselves that we, are, that no one's ever going to like us, that no one, we're not good enough for anyone. And these are where these self beliefs come from. And there's part of the work that I do with some of my clients is to go into those self beliefs that we told ourselves for over 15, 20 years, however long, that have become part of our core belief system, which just isn't the case a lot of the time. And it needs to be rewired and rethought about in a different way to get over that. And that is something I had to go through, something I had to learn, was that I am good enough. I am beautiful. I am all these sorts of things that I had to tell myself, because for so long I told myself the opposite.
Yeah, completely. One of the, I think, almost the first step to childhood trauma, not saying, there's varying degrees of trauma. I'm not saying that your experience was necessarily a trauma as much as it may have been incredibly distressing, but one of the first steps to overcome any distressing childhood experience is to sort of contemplate the fact that you are no longer a child, and that as much as you're buried in your subconscious is the thoughts and memories and sort of inferences and judgments that you made as a result of whatever happened to you in your childhood. You're no longer that child anymore, and you're not as vulnerable as you once were. But obviously that is something that people never get a hold of. People can never get a grasp on, because it's just buried so raw, isn't it? It's so primal, those experiences.
No, definitely. There's a lot of work you can do with your inner child. So, speaking to your inner child. I've done it through meditation. Gone back and pictured myself, envisioned myself as my 10-year-old self going through them problems, and just telling myself, it's okay, I've got you, I'm safe. Sorry, I'm safe. I love you. All these things that we, maybe hadn't heard as a child, we tell ourselves through meditation, through these practices. And there's definitely work that can be done with your inner child, to focus on that, like you said, that subconsciously wired belief system that we carry through into our adulthood. But there's definitely work to be done there, 100%.
Absolutely. So as you got older and the sort of feelings were still there, how did secondary school, and how did it go?
In secondary school, I found it difficult to integrate into groups of friends. So sometimes found it very isolating. I never really, fitted into many groups. I was I used to float between groups. And I never really had stable friendship, group of friends growing up. I had a few that would, from where I lived down the same street as me. But again, it was that feeling of never fitting in, never being accepted and being good enough to fit in. I would always worry that I wasn't cool enough. I wasn't, I didn't have the latest trend of trainers. I didn't have, and it's just those sorts of things. You're constantly comparing yourself, and that in school was, a big problem. So I just tried to get my head down in school, which I found a little bit difficult because my attention span can be all over the place sometimes, and I find it hard to focus on things. But I did the best I could in school. I came out of school with, I think it was 8 GCSEs or something like that. I got my, standard 5 GCSEs,
Nice.
and then went to college. But then, like I said, again, through college, I carried that, insecurity, that low level of confidence, low self-worth. I carried that through with me, and it was evident. I could look back at pictures and the way I was acting, the way I was feeling. I didn't know who I was. I was trying to dress different ways. I was trying to express myself different ways, and I suppose at the time that was me trying to get to know myself and trying to find somewhere that I would fit. But that never really happened. I just carried on, and even into my 20s, it was pretty much the same. Now I feel very, very relaxed, very, very comfortable with the person I am. I understand the person I am and what makes me tick. And it's something that I think everyone should have the right to know and to feel comfortable, because you don't really get to do that unless you do the work. You do the inner work that you need to do to get to this point. But yeah, high school, I wouldn't say it was anything, like I said, traumatic. The bullying sort of calmed down a little bit. I was still, it's high school. You always get stuff that goes on. Had the odd fight here and there. But yeah, even through school, I wasn't very focused on having a career or anything like that. I just focused on getting through school as such. I don't think I would say I was a very career-driven person. Going through school, you saw people with their heads down in books, aspiring to be doctors, aspiring to be the next prime minister. I don't know, but for me, there was never really a passion of mine. Through school, I never really knew what I wanted to do. Even through college, I had no idea. I started to study English language and law at college. Had no real interest in them, but and over a period of time, it became apparent that route of education wasn't for me. So then I went into a trade. I became an electrician, and then I've done that for almost 8-9 years on and off, until I'm doing what I'm doing now.
Brilliant. That was a lot to remember. I'm trying to think what you said right at the beginning. Oh yeah, you were speaking about like how young people can feel like they don't know what their identity is, and I think that's absolutely spot on, especially in the modern era. Even, to be fair, even the term identity, what does that really mean? It's a complicated one in the sense
Yeah,
of, like, I think everyone to some degree is a square peg trying to fit into the round hole of societal expectations,
exactly.
and we all have to deal with that. But then, and finding a group of people or groups of people that you can connect with is obviously very, very important. And lots
Yeah,
of young people do fall by the wayside,
yeah,
possibly more and more, although there's now sort of groups out there that are almost recruiting young people who have fallen by the wayside, which in some ways that's good, and then in some ways it's not, because some of the belief systems that they're trying to sort of implement into these young people aren't necessarily, I don't believe, are necessarily the healthiest and the most
no.
beneficial to them.
It's a hard place for children now. I honestly believe, you know, growing up as a child in today's society, with social media and all the things going on around the world, I try not to read into too much, because I think reading into too much news, into too much media, too much social media, is really detrimental, especially to people of a young age, consuming the amount of news, the amount of chaos that goes on, and a lot of fake stuff. A lot of stuff that just simply isn't real, simply isn't true,
Yeah.
and becomes part of their belief system, becomes part of what they believe. And like I said, going back 20 maybe years, I think it was very much a lot more simpler to grow up. But yeah, to be a child or a teenager in today's society, scary. I honestly believe it's quite scary.
Yeah, scary, intimidating, and growing up is sort of isolating and confusing enough as it is. So all that
Yeah,
happens when you add more complexity onto it is I suppose you increase the threshold at which people fall off the cliff
yeah,
of, the sort of existential cliff, which is what's sort of going on a bit at the moment.
no, definitely.
How did, how did drinking change your perception of the world
Wow.
and yourself when you started drinking?
I started to go out with friends. The first time I went out was probably 18. Obviously, turn 18 years old, you think, yes, I can go and drink in a club. I can go and do these fun things. But like I said, when
Vamos.
you
Yeah.
mix it with someone that's very sensitive, that's someone that's very in their head a lot of the time, drinking only fuels that. Drinking's a depressant. So you add that on top of the problems you've already got, then it becomes an even bigger problem. And then obviously you then tend to drink even more to try and cover the problem you've got. So for me, it wasn't that I was an alcoholic. It wasn't that I was drinking, to that extent. But I would go out 3 or 4 times a week with my friends. We'd be drinking too early hours of the morning. Then I started to mix in. At an age of 18, 19, you're very experimental. I think it'll be wrong to say that most people don't try it at some stage. Some stage in their life, it gets introduced to you, becomes part of your social circle as such. I think that's a big problem again in today's society, is that drugs is so easily accessible. It's so easily passed around the groups, or you're in a friendship group, and you're all before I've met many people that are part of friendship groups that are all partaking and taking drugs at a very young age, and I think it's only getting younger. But for me, as soon as I started to drink, I would then, obviously the drugs come with it, and I would go out for 2 or 3 days, then I would come home and I would feel absolutely horrendous for 3 or 4 days, and then it just spiraled from there. It just went further and further down the line until we got to a point where I was going out and I wasn't enjoying myself anymore, but I was going out because it was part of my routine. I'd done it so much and I didn't want to miss out on things. You sort of just go, and I fell into that trap really, and it got to a point, like I said, where my tolerance to drugs, it got so high that I was consuming more than probably I would have ever dreamed of. But it got to a point really where actually, don't mind moving on to this bit, is that where the moment came for me in change, and it was a moment I woke up in the morning on a hangover, on a come down, and I went for a walk, just a random walk, and had like a to this day I can't really describe it, like an out of body sort of experience as such. That something said to me, today's the last day this is going to happen. Today's the last day this is going to be. You're going to do this. And from that day on, I really started to change my life around. Yeah. And that was sort of that moment for me. And I believe everyone has a moment. Everyone gets to a point where they have that moment. And yeah, that was great. Luckily, that was 2 or 3 years ago.
Big up.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that is fortunate, and who knows what goes on to elicit or for something like that to occur. That's a podcast in itself, isn't it? So just going back to the alcohol, as you were talking, I was thinking it's possible that as a society we require, because of our lifestyle of being quite self-involved and looking at our phones and possibly slightly more competitive nowadays in multiple ways than it has been historically, it's possible that we require more sort of social lubrication to feel at ease, and therefore that's why alcohol, because that's obviously what alcohol is to some, well, it's one of the things that alcohol does, is it lubricates your ability to be extroverted and to have a good time, etc., etc. And it's possible that relax, exactly, it's possible that we require that more and more because we're becoming less and less like that in our natural state of being. Did you get what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you're saying, exactly what you're saying. It's everything's geared much more towards, these days, everything's online, a lot of things online, and like you said, the social element of being with your friends and having a drink is very it's very normal. It's very normal. I got to a point where I tried the traditional sort of counselling and antidepressants, which never worked for me. I can appreciate that they do work for certain people, and it's a great method for some people, but I don't think it's the be all of end all. Is that right? Do you know what I mean? What I'm trying to say, it's not the answer for everyone.
It's not a panacea.
When I started, and then obviously after trying them sorts of methods, I sort of felt a bit. At first, I felt very deflated. That nothing was ever going to work for me, and I was always going to be stuck feeling the way that I was. And that sort of then forced me to look elsewhere and to look into the holistic approach and the self-development side of things. And it just became very interesting to me, all of a sudden, that there was lots of methods and practices that I could partake in myself that was going to have a big benefit on the way I felt about myself. So I started to read books, started to listen to podcasts, started to listen to motivational messages, motivational videos. And I think that's a really good one, actually, for people that are feeling very depressed or feeling very down. Motivational videos are great because they can really resonate with you and ignite a sort of spark within. And that's what it did for me. And as soon as I started to look at books and look at meditation and breath work and all these sorts of practices now that are part of my daily routine, the more I started to do them, the more I realised, hang on a minute, this is having a big effect on me and is really changing the way that I feel about myself and the way that I look at life, the way my mood is. I started to eat more because I had more of an appetite because I felt myself. And that was something I never, when I was going through the hard time, I wouldn't eat a lot. I'd maybe eat once a day. I just didn't have much. Not I didn't want to eat, it's just I didn't have an appetite. I think that's quite a big telltale sign as well. I mean, if loss of appetite, can be a big indicator of stress. And I think, that was something I was going through at the time. But obviously, when I started meditating and journaling, all these, practices, then I started to feel a lot better. And I started to talk about it, I started to tell people about it. And is it reconnecting? Yeah, started to talk to people and put it on my social media, and a lot of people became interested into how I was doing things, how I was pulling myself out of the hole that I was in such a short space of time. So now it's something that I speak to my clients about putting into their routines, and something that I make sure that they have part of their daily routine, because it makes such a difference. And more people should know about it. More people should know about their methods and their practices, for sure.
Yeah. So two things. One, because whenever I recommend meditation to people, I always everyone gets the same answer, which is, oh yeah, but I can't stop thinking, so then I can't do it, and then I just stop doing it. So how did you overcome that problem?
Okay,
Perceived
so
problem, because it's not
I
actually
get
a
this a
problem.
lot as well. I get it. No, not at all. I get this a lot, and for a lot of people, they have this perception that meditation is sat on the floor with your legs crossed, with your hands on your knees, completely still, completely free of any thought, and just floating on some realm, some different dimensional realm. It's just simply not the case. Meditation, for me, it can mean different things to many people. Meditation, walking's meditation. Running for some people's meditation. If you run without headphones, it's you have a lot of time to think. And for me, meditation is giving myself and giving my mind the time to just sit with my own thoughts. When we're moving around day to day, we've got constant influences from sound, from talking to people, from senses, that the thoughts get put to the back of our brain as such, because we're dealing with what's right in front of us. So having that time to sit and meditate gives you and allows you that time to actually process your thoughts. Now, yes, when you sit to meditate, of course, your head is going to be going, at different, mine goes at 1,000,000 miles an hour sometimes. And I can have 10 different thoughts in my head, and it's a mess. But the longer you sit there and the longer you think, and just work through the thoughts, you can get to a place of pretty much very calm, and a place where your head's very much more organized. And I think that's the misconception with meditation, is that you instantly can just zone out and go to this place of pure quiet and pure bliss. And it's just not the case. Meditation is to give you that time, to allow you to deal with those thoughts. And I look at meditation as, the mind is the sky, and the thoughts are the clouds. So just allow the clouds to pass and just deal with the thought, allow it to pass. And the longer you do that, the more comfortable you get with sitting for a longer period of time. You can get to a point where you've dealt with most things in your head, and you get to that calm place where it's very peaceful and very relaxing. But it takes time, it takes practice as well, for sure.
It does, yeah. And I love that analogy of the sky and the clouds. I think that's really good. And then the other question I had was, when you say journaling, what exactly do you mean by journaling? What are you writing down?
Okay, so this has actually become something very, very. I do it a lot now, and since I've been traveling, I do it a hell of a lot, because journaling for me is just again another chance for me to unload some things that are in my mind. You know, by writing
Yep.
things down, it can definitely, go from here to the paper, and it allows you to let go of, any feelings. Sometimes my journal entries can be, a bit negative. Sometimes they're extremely positive. Sometimes I write about, people experiences I've had, but it's whatever comes to, my mind. And I don't like to sort of think about what I'm journaling. I just like to let it flow and just let it just sort of pour out of me, and whatever gets written down gets written down. And it's actually quite interesting to read back a couple of months later and just flick open on a random page and read it and just think, wow, I was really feeling it that day, or I wasn't feeling it that day, and you can sort of learn a lot from your journal, because you can write down the things that you don't like. You can write down the experiences, the feelings you don't like, and it's a way of becoming more familiar with that. So journaling for me is a massive one, and I do it at least an hour every day, if not longer.
Wow.
But again, for anyone starting journaling, it's just a chance just to write anything. Don't think about what you're writing. Just open the page, get a pen, and just put pen to paper, and just allow your brain to release what it needs to, really. But yeah, anyone that hasn't tried journaling, I really recommend it, because it's really helped me.
Yeah, I agree. Journaling is... Oh, there you go. I've frozen again. Yeah. You do an hour a day. That is mad. How long have you been doing that for?
Yeah. It's been more since I've been traveling, for sure, because you meet incredible people, you hear incredible stories, and I forget things most of the time. My memory's not brilliant, so it's a good chance for me to remember things. But that's not an hour, straight off. Over the whole day, I'll pick my journal up, or if something comes to my mind, or I want to write about something, or write about the way I'm feeling, then I just take 5 minutes to write out a few words, or and I can get anything from a page done some days to 3 or 4 pages. So it just varies on how I'm feeling, and if I need to write anything down. But I think it's a great way for people to really get into actually looking more inwards, because if you write down the way you're feeling in certain times, it's good to refer back to be able to look at.
Yeah, and it must be so cathartic having that sort of practice of writing things down, getting all your thoughts. It must be so releasing. And it's such a cliche, isn't it? If you don't bottle your thoughts up, tell someone about it. Well, if you don't want to tell someone about them, then the second best option is to write them down.
I sometimes speak to my journal. Like, I'll write as if I'm writing about, telling someone, in that sort of tense. So
Oh, very good.
it's a good way to, it's a good way to really connect with it, and just allow whatever you're feeling to just come through pen to paper, because no one's going to see it. It's only for you to see. What you've written. And when I first started journaling, I would always judge myself and think, you know, is what I've written there good enough, or have I written everything down? But now it's just the point where I
Yeah,
just write whatever I want to write when I feel like writing it.
yeah. That's like the process of overcoming the inner critic and not being sort
Yeah.
of thwarted and controlled by that
Mm.
inner critic that we all have in our heads.
Yeah.
And I think so
Mm.
many people fall at that hurdle in anything in life
Yeah.
because the inner critic gets a
Mm.
hold of you. And if you can
Yeah.
practice to overcome that, it's so beneficial.
Mm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, especially for me, I used to be terrible with that sort of thing. I'd always criticise myself. Everything had to be perfect. Um,
I can
and
imagine, yeah.
one of the main things that for me to get outside of that and to overcome that was just to get out of my comfort zone. Like,
Yeah.
really pushing myself to not be comfortable and to get out of my comfort zone, try new things. You know, feel free to express myself, and in any way that I choose to. Um, and one of the techniques I always used to use, and it's one that's talked about like vastly in the self development world, is that counting down from five. being in a situation and just going 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, boom, go. And you'd be surprised if you count yourself down, that when you hit 1 and you just step and you just go for it. And like 9 times out of 10, maybe you're going to get knocked back here and there, but putting yourself out there, if you give it your all and you give it everything, I truly believe you can never fail. You don't fail in life if you give it your everything, because even if you fail, you've learned, why you failed, and you've learned, not what to do next time. But, this is all about getting out of your comfort zone. And in terms of growth, I think that's one of the most important things.
It is, especially for people who have an anxious or a sensitive disposition. I feel like attempting to push your comfort zone is an even more necessary action, because if you don't, then maybe your sort of comfort zone starts to close in on you. But if you
become
do,
very
then
introverted.
you have to. Yeah, exactly. You have to, and if you're introverted as well, you have to keep pushing that comfort zone. And the great thing about pushing the comfort zone is, I think maybe we spoke about this before. I spoke about it with someone else. When you conquer something that you're afraid of, it doesn't just exist in that specific little thing that you're afraid of. The strength that you garner from that feat spreads out to your entirety of your sort of capacity for doing things.
Yeah.
So I think that's the great thing about doing something you're afraid of, is it doesn't just, well, they know this. When you do something, when you face something you're afraid of, it doesn't make you less afraid. It makes you stronger. It makes you braver, which is a way better thing than being less afraid. Being braver is actually what we should all aim for, because it means that you
100%.
can face multiple different things and be less afraid, as opposed to just and be, I suppose it appears like you're less afraid, as opposed to just being less afraid of that tiny little thing that you conquered.
Having a high, when you get knocked back, it's very easy. I mean, I've been through it myself. There was a period in my life where I was going through different jobs. I was getting knocked back all the time, and where I was going through the dark times, any sort of criticism was affecting me massively. And it's at the point now where I'm in, a position where negative feedback now, I take it on board, but it just bounces off. I take what I need to from it, and I don't get that negative attachment to that feeling anymore. And that has come from doing the work on myself and just having a higher sense of self-worth. And not letting things get to me. I used to be incredibly sensitive to people's comments, to people's opinions, to people's judgments. And that was because I had a low level of self-worth, low level of confidence, and that's something I've built over the last few years. And it's got to a point now where I'm very comfortable with who I am, and I find it very easy to take criticism. It's just someone's opinion. You can take from it what you want, but it's not to take it on too strongly and take it to heart too much. And just try and look at the parts that you can improve and stuff like that. And I think that's a good bit of advice for anyone, is just because someone doesn't agree with what you might do or doesn't like what you do doesn't mean it's wrong. And I think there's a lot of work for people to do in terms of mindset to get to that place of feeling comfortable with yourself and in them situations.
And what would you say is the work that needs to be done on mindset?
So there's loads, a lot of people have come from like a fixed mindset. And a fixed mindset would be someone, for example, that doesn't believe they can get any better at what they do. So, say they've got a job in, I don't know, being a bricklayer. They can lay 1 million bricks a day, but they're never going to be the finished article. They're always going to have more growth to do. There's always growth to be had, and that is the growth mindset rather than the fixed mindset. Someone in a fixed mindset may, view the world as they have this higher level of, what's the word? Like a higher level above it, like they're better than anyone else. That makes sense. They feel like they're better than someone else.
Superiority.
Just because they have a different skill set doesn't mean they're better than someone else. It just means that they have a different skill set, if that makes sense. But in terms of in terms of confidence and self-worth, stuff like keeping goals, doing daily goals, that's a big one, because setting yourself goals in the morning, even just little goals, and then achieving them throughout the day, builds that level of self-confidence, and raises the level of self-worth. Because if you were to ask a friend, a friend kept letting you down all the time and wasn't keeping their promises, you probably wouldn't trust that friend, and you probably wouldn't have that much respect for that friend. So therefore, why do we do it to ourselves? Why do we promise ourselves things? Why do we say to ourselves, "Well, I'm going to do this," and then never do it? And that is where the shift comes, where you don't have a high level of self-worth, because you don't trust yourself to be able to keep up with these tasks, keep up with these goals. So, like, one thing for everyone I recommend to do is to get up every morning, just set yourself 3 goals. Just set yourself 3 goals. So 3 simple little goals throughout the day. Maybe it could be drink 2 litres of water a day. It could be take the dog for a walk. But once you write these down and you actually start ticking these boxes off, that's where the growth starts to come, and you start to raise that level of confidence and believe in yourself more, build that trust with yourself. And that's what self-development is all about. It's about going from a place where you don't trust yourself, you don't feel great about yourself, to a place where you're very happy with who you are and you understand yourself. And that's a lot of the problem, I think, with today's society, is people just don't understand themselves. They don't understand what makes them feel the way they do and act the way they do. But self-development can do that for you, and that's something I've learned over the last 2 or 3 years, is that there's so much about me that I didn't realise, which gives me a lot of answers to why I act the way I do and why I do the things I do.
Expanding on the part that you mentioned about making 3 goals a day, I think either I read a book or I listened to a podcast where someone said, if you're in really dire circumstances, and if your world is crumbling around you, then just focus on things that you can do, and just see a goal, even if it's as small as having a shower in the morning or cleaning your teeth. Just see every single thing that you achieve as a win, and don't ever assume that you're above a goal, because that's an incorrect way of perceiving the world. You may be above a goal in some sense, but I don't know, how do you explain it? There's a part of you, even using the term above a goal is a bit damning. Just try and make micro steps and sort of
take day by day,
reap in the take day by day.
Yeah, just day by day. And you can only, for me, when I first started doing goals and setting myself goals, it would literally be sometimes, get to the end of the day without, feeling like I want to crawl in a hole and die, Some days it was just get to the end of the day, and then as time goes on, you start to build that trust with yourself, and you start to set yourself bigger goals. And, when you hit those goals, even there could be the smallest things, smallest of things. Like I said, take the dog for a walk, or go do the shopping. But the fact that you've set yourself that goal and you've actually completed it, you can get to the end of the day and you feel good about yourself, because you think, oh, I said I was going to do this, and I've done it. And it's so simple. There's just such a simple thing you can implement into your routine in the morning. It takes 5 minutes to write something down, and you wouldn't believe the amount of, how good that can make you feel and what it can do for your self-development, something so simple. And it's a really good gateway to the rest of the self-development space and work, just starting off with something small. You'll see the benefits, and then you go from there. It's literally what I did. I started setting myself goals, and then it got to a point where I was like, okay, I'm enjoying this. Right, let's now start writing down, about how we're progressing and how we're growing. And that then led on to journaling, and then obviously along came the meditation, the breath work, lots of other practices as well. So, once you start to see those benefits, it really can have a sort of snowball effect, and you kind of get locked into this sort of world.